Jane Unchained live talk with breaking news. The whole world has heard now that Donald Trump is ordering meat processing plants to remain open, even though they are hotbeds of coronavirus, some of the biggest outbreaks in the United States and the world occurring inside those slaughterhouses, which means to force them to remain open is to essentially potentially sign a death sentence for the workers. So let me ask you, Edita, what is your reaction to that? Because it seems to have brought the workers' rights and the animal rights together, as there is national outrage over his decision.
Yeah, this is much deserved outrage, because for a long time, many have been talking about how these kind of animal agriculture operations are so exploitative and cruel, not only to animals, but to the workers, who are often exploited and mistreated. And we see how they are just considered expendable or collateral damage to the Trump administration, who is literally forcing these people to risk their lives, knowing there will be many more deaths likely as a result of forcing these workers to work in these unbelievably hazardous conditions. Also, that the supply of meat doesn't get any lower. I mean, this is absolutely a disgrace.
Now, I want to show what I thought was a breakthrough moment on cable television last night. Rachel Maddow, who is, let's face it, the leader of the progressives, the antidote to, let's say, the Fox News coverage, she actually used the word vegan. We're going to watch that clip, hopefully, and we are going to comment on it.
I'm just thinking about this for 1 second. Why have meat plants been closing all over? Why have meat plants been closing? It's not like it's been some loose plot to make everybody a vegan or to make meat packing look bad. These plants have been closing in all of these different states all over the country for one very simple, very consistent reason. Because these facilities are in the elite, the very top rung of the places in America where the most people are being infected the most quickly by this virus. They have proved to be an incredibly efficient location for creating enormous outbreaks of coronavirus.
All right. I hope that you all were able to hear that. We're very delighted to have Rachel McCrystal, who is the director of the Woodstock Farm Animal Sanctuary. What is your reaction now to this new focus, since you're somebody who rescues these animals, and we're actually going to put up a photo of one of the animals who got out, one of the animals who has gotten out of the slaughter pipeline and escaped, and you've rescued so many. What is your reaction, Rachel, to the fact that another Rachel Maddow, was actually using the word vegan and discussing the fact that, hey, these are animals in there?
Yeah, I hope she becomes another vegan Rachel. There's a lot of us. I think that people have no idea what happens at slaughterhouses. And so when they're hearing news about the mass depopulations that are happening right now, they're horrified. But they don't understand that the truth is that all of these animals were going to be killed as babies. And not only as babies, but as sick babies. I mean, you shared a photo of Stacy, the hen who was rescued. She escaped from a market in New York, a live kill market in the city in August, was found right nearby one. She had obviously gotten out herself and saved herself, and was found by an activist who brought her up to Woodstock. And that's the condition she was in when she was sent to slaughter. When we're eating animals, we're eating sick, scared, terrified animals, and mostly babies. We have taken in so many from the city, as have other sanctuaries in the surrounding areas. So these animals that jump off the back of transport trucks headed to these auctions and these markets, animals that have run out the front door, animals that people rescue and give a little mercy and release in parks and are found days later. And they're all sick and scared and terrified. And so I'm personally very heartened that hopefully people are now paying attention to this, and really seeing that our our animal ag industry is not only unsustainable, it's completely cruel.
It is completely cruel. And, when this was happening, there was a move at the same time, an actual Trump administration directive to allow high-speed slaughter, which is even more horrific. Donny Moss, I want to play some footage that you, through theirturn.net, got from wet markets in New York City. And I have two clips. One is less graphic, and the other actually shows what happens. Which one do you think we should go for, Donny?
I mean, I think you should show what really happens. I mean, part of the problem that we have in the mainstream public is that people don't actually know what's happening. If the mainstream media is calling slaughterhouses processing plants, and instead of using the word killing or murdering, they're saying depopulating. If our ears are too fragile to even hear these words, or our eyes are too fragile to read them in the print, then imagine how difficult it is for the actual individuals who have to go through it. So yeah, I think that people need to be educated and see the truth about who they're eating.
All right, so here is a very short clip of what happens in, whether it's, you call it a wet market, whether you call it a live market, whether you call it a slaughterhouse, it's a killing factory. Whether they give it directly to the consumer or they put it in a nice patty, it's killing innocent beings who don't have to die because there's no reason to eat them. Watch, if you dare. All right, there you go. Horrifying, and I'm sure that those people who are seeing it, who haven't been in there, are hopefully horrified. If you're not horrified, then go see a psychiatrist, because it's horrifying. Jill Carnegie, you are the head of Slaughter Free New York City. You are fighting to close those wet markets. Do you think there's been a psychic shift in the public, given that the mainstream media is being forced to cover this issue?
Absolutely. First of all, I do want to let the viewers know that the first clip of the lamb was taken at a market in Brooklyn. That is.
You don't need to name names.
I'm sorry?
No names, please.
But I want people to know that this is across the street from a school and a playground. A lot of these markets are located across or next to residences and places like that where children play when we're not in pandemic. And the other is in Queens. So these are both taken within New York City limits, both of these clips. Now, what we've seen with Slaughter Free NYC, as activists, we've been working on this issue and documenting for years, and this movement to start to shut them down started last year. However, in January, we launched officially as Slaughter Free NYC, and my goodness, the change we have seen just in the short time. When we first launched, everyone was reacting to our message of making New York City a slaughter-free zone as though we were extremist and radical and unrealistic. And lo and behold, 2 months later, we're saying the same exact thing, and people are suddenly saying, well, yes, absolutely, these should be shut down. And thank goodness mainstream media is finally willing to cover this important issue of nearly 100 slaughterhouses and around 80 of them being these live animal markets with storefronts available to the public to enter. You know, I mean, this is unconscionable. And New York City is home to more of these markets than any city in the United States. And we're also the most densely populated. This is a dangerous combination for public health.
Yeah, I want to play one more clip. It's short. It's not as graphic as the last one. That's really what happens. And people need to, you know, they need to come to terms with, if they're buying this food, they are ordering the hit, literally. Now, I covered crime for many years. You don't have to be the person who pulls the trigger or uses the knife to slit somebody's throat. If you are part of a group that has made a plan to kill someone, you can be convicted of murder just as easily as the person who pulled the trigger. That's not the basis for determining whether somebody has committed murder or not. The basis is, were you involved in orchestrating the killing of another being not in self-defense? And that's called murder. It's homicide. So what we really need the public to realize, now that this coronavirus is front and center, and it's based to a large degree, the major clusters are in slaughterhouses around the country, that when you look at the inside of those slaughterhouses and you're worried about the workers, those workers are risking their lives to go in and kill for you so you can eat something that is not necessary for you to eat, that's bad for your health, that leads to heart disease, and where processed meat is considered a carcinogen, other health problems, and is a leading contributor to climate change. All of that for your insistence that it's your personal choice to eat these animals. So let's go in and take another look at another, this is just shot by Donny Moss, the gentleman you're looking at your screen there, recently in a wet market, a live market, a slaughterhouse in New York City. So I'd like to get a roundtable reaction. First of all, Donny Moss, kudos to you for having the courage to go in there and videotape that. What was that like emotionally for you, Donny?
First of all, I'd like to say I have been in many wet markets. The footage that you just saw in those videos was taken primarily by Jill Carnegie from SlaughterFreeNYC. However, I've taken a lot of footage, and I've been in a wet market, Jane, with you actually in New York City a year or so ago. And it is, it's obviously very upsetting, you know, to see animals intensively confined in cages and struggling to breathe. I mean, so many of these animals have respiratory disease. One of the ironies here is that these markets, which are a breeding ground for infectious disease, and which is where COVID-19 emerged from, a wet market or live animal market in China, these are deemed as essential businesses and are open right now while most everything else is shut down. The disconnect is so glaring. But yeah, Jane, it is it's gut-wrenching to be around these animals, and you want to open every cage and rescue every animal and take them to sanctuaries. But there's, as Rachel McCrystal will attest to, there's only so much space that in each sanctuary, and there are billions upon billions of animals who are raised in factories and massacred in slaughterhouses every year.
So Jill, my apologies, you shot that. We're getting footage in from everywhere, so we're trying to just get as much out. What was your emotional reaction to being there and bearing witness to the slaughter of that lamb, sheep? Tell me.
Well, these are horrible, horrible places to go into. Pretty much once you start this work, whether you are rescuing, documenting, or both, you do tend to take on dissociative tendencies when you're there, and you try to just look through the lens of a camera, almost like remove yourself so that you can capture these stories and these individuals and make sure that they are seen and recognized at the very least, if you're not able to get them out. I can tell you that as fortunate as I've been to be able to rescue quite a number of animals from these markets, like Donny said, every one of them is sick. And not only are they sick with diseases that affect all of them, primarily respiratory illnesses that you can always see evidence of in these markets, but also every sheep and goat that I have been a part of rescuing in the last couple of years has been infected with an illness called ORF, which is essentially something similar to the herpes infection, and that is transmissible to humans. And so these animals are infected with diseases that can transmit to humans already. And that is before the morphing process or whatever happens to viruses to turn them into severe outbreaks and pandemics, you know, that can come from. Now, these places, the other thing that is really, really distressing to see, and I can tell you that since the shutdown, I've personally been inside approximately 20 locations in the last 2 weeks that are still operating. These workers are also being exploited. They are working shoulder to shoulder in filthy conditions. They're not wearing the proper protective gear. They're not even wearing shoe coverings, many of them, let alone masks and gloves. They're slaughtering animals barehanded, literally barehanded. They are slitting these animals' throats. So the only people benefiting from these markets operating right now are literally the small number of owners who are profiting off of the murder of animals, the unsanitary conditions and environmental racism of these markets that exist in low-income communities, and the exploitation of their workers who they're putting at risk every single day for very, very low wages. It's just exploitation upon suffering upon suffering. It is abhorrent and it needs to stop, hands down. And we can all opt out of the system right now by becoming vegan immediately with our next meal. We do not have to pay for this.
Do you see, and we generally don't talk about, you know, politics here, but this does impact this issue, where you had Rachel Maddow saying this isn't a blue state effort to make everybody vegan, but there is now a commonality between the desires of the vegan animal rights community and workers to keep these plants closed, as Donald Trump pushes to have them remain open. And so this is an opportunity for us to actually find commonality, common ground, and work with union leaders and others who would normally not be partnering with animal activists, climate change activists, but now we're starting to see that oppression is oppression. And if a company that, let's say, kills 20,000 pigs a day is also telling workers, go in, do your job, even though you might die and get coronavirus, Rachel McCrystal, do you see this as a tragic opportunity to form a bond? Because, you know, killing is killing. I guess at the end of the day, it's not such a big leap to go from killing animals to killing people.
Yeah, I think the workers working at these slaughterhouses are some of the most exploited people on the planet. They're often undocumented. There's threats of things like deportation held over their heads if they unionize or somehow try to demand better rights. I think we need to be doing everything we can as an animal rights community to have compassion for them, and also advocate loudly that the slaughterhouses should be closed, remain closed, and let's try to transition these large, huge, unsustainable meat industries into something more plant-based, better for everybody. When I see that the footage that Jill got, all I can see it is all the chickens and all the lambs that I know personally and that are just so special and magical. And I'm hoping that with this awareness that's coming from what's happening all around the country, that people will start seeing these animals as individuals, and also learn what happens to the workers. Because if people have a choice, they don't choose to work at slaughterhouses. They just don't. Nobody's choosing that over another position. It's not happening. So if we can get the workers into better jobs and convert the industry now, it'll save billions of animals, and it'll also save these exploited workers as well.
Yes. And so I want to talk a little bit about the fact that we are seeing shifting sands. There's so much to talk about. We've talked about the fact that the president wants to keep the meat packing, as the media calls it, the slaughterhouses open, despite the fact that they are hotbeds of coronavirus and workers are getting sick and dying. And in some cases, they're not even being tested. And we've talked about the fact that mainstream media, for various political reasons, some on the right when they want to point the finger at wet markets, some on the left when they're talking about the exploitation of these low-income workers who are doing killing for the Americans, are talking about slaughterhouses. Now, I want to talk about how some news organizations are pushing the edge. So we had TMZ, which put this headline up, and I'll get rid of this banner. San Francisco Bay Area wet market still open with live fowl, rabbits, gruesome, appalling video. And that is more now centering almost in the animal rights direction. So you see this whole panoply of different ways of approaching it from different news media outlets. But I'd like to play an interview that TMZ did with Edita, who is here. And this is a breakthrough moment for our movement because she was talking animal rights to millions of people on TMZ. Let's hear it.
I live in New York City. I'm in Queens, which is the epicenter of the pandemic in North America. There are over 80 of these live animal slaughter markets operating right now, a perfect storm environment, a breeding ground for other infectious diseases and future pandemics. And many organizations have been talking about this for a long time, and there hasn't been the attention paid. But now that the whole world is looking at how dangerous these wet markets are to all life on Earth, we cannot ignore this anymore. State Assembly Member Linda Rosenthal is going to propose legislation to prohibit the operation of these live markets in California, Illinois, to ban the operation of these places because there's often blood, feces, body parts littering the public streets that then have to be hosed down. People that live in the area walk through that all of those things are on their shoes. Then they take the subway, they bring that into their home. This is a huge public safety risk, and it really cannot be allowed to operate any longer.
So that was huge. First of all, let's hear it for Edita, making it on there and so articulate. I mean, and I'm happy to say that I was also helping TMZ as well as Jill and Donny and everybody. It was a team effort trying to get them video from New York, from San Francisco, from Texas, so that they could see that this is an American problem, not just a problem across the globe in China. So let's ask everybody around table, is this a breakthrough moment for animal rights? And let's start with Edita, since you were on.
I really think it is. I think that these issues that were sort of below the radar for most Americans are now forced into people's faces. I keep harkening back to it. Reminds me of over 100 years ago. It was the publication of The Jungle by Upton Sinclair that shocked people. And that actually propelled legislators to create kind of the food safety regulations we have now. But it really was the descriptions of the horrors, the horrible conditions the animals were in, how they were sick and diseased, the exploitation of the workers that really galvanized the public. And here we are again, over 100 years later, but we need a much bigger revolution in animal agriculture right now. But these issues are being brought to the forefront. And the fact that TMZ, other media outlets that would not normally cover this, are covering this, and it is outraging regular Americans. There's people, I have friends who are lifelong New Yorkers that didn't know that these live markets even existed and that there's over 80 of them. And as Rachel and others have pointed out, this highlights the fact that when we systematically abuse and mistreat animals, it comes back to kill us. Because all of these animals that have either been escaped or rescued from these live markets, all were diseased, filled with parasites, E. coli, salmonella. There's been test results that show even other viral infectious diseases in animals in live markets. And these live animal markets are just sort of a microcosm of the larger factory farming system. They're kind of mini factory farms operating within New York City. But this highlights how radically dysfunctional our entire animal agriculture system is. And it's not so much the question anymore of how can we change the way we are treating animals, but why? Why are we doing this? Why are we continuing to do this when it destroys the environment and human health and wreaks worldwide havoc? Why are we continuing this? And the question can be shifted to, how can we transition out of this? How can we transition away from what is literally destroying our planet?
And what's so interesting is these are shots from a live market where you see a woman here putting live chickens into a cart, and people go, "Oh, that's horrible. Why? Sorry, but why is that any worse than putting dead chickens who somebody killed for you into a cart?" So this outrage over the wet markets, Donny, is what I would call selective indignation. But back to the breakthrough. Are we having a breakthrough moment right now?
Well, what's interesting is that when news broke that the pandemic originated in a live animal market, those of us who've been working on this issue in New York City jumped right on top of it by pointing out, hey, we have these live animal markets right here in New York City that are a breeding ground for infectious disease. And we started to show the footage on the footage that you've been showing on social media. And people were outraged, not only because we have these wet markets that risk the public health, but also they were outraged by the cruelty and the violence. And that was encouraging to me. And what it showed me is that people really do care once they see the footage. The problem is the kind of footage that you're showing, Jane, isn't shown really in the mainstream media. I'm working with a reporter right now from a local TV station in New York City on the live animal market story. And he keeps reminding me when he asks me for footage that he can't show anything bloody. So everyone is being shielded from the images. We have ag-gag laws in the United States that prevent people like us from documenting what goes on inside of slaughterhouses. As Paul McCartney says, there's a reason that these factory farms or slaughterhouses don't have windows, because if people knew the truth, they would stop consuming them.
Yes, and the reason I think that this is a perfect storm moment where everything is coming together is that it really gets back to when one of us is oppressed, all of us are oppressed. And the mentality that would allow people to have an industry that just kills and set up gigantic killing factories is the same mentality that is callous toward the fact that workers going into these coronavirus-ridden facilities right now are risking their lives. I want to read a quote from a Texas slaughterhouse worker. Trump says we're part of critical infrastructure, that we're essential workers. I don't feel critical. I don't feel essential. I feel sacrificial. Isn't it the same mentality, Rachel, when you get down to it?
It is. These are dispendable people and these are dispendable animals, and there's no value on any of their lives currently. And I think just like you're saying, all oppression is connected and we need to be highlighting this. I agree with Donny though. I think the more we can actually share what happens, people have no idea. And they have no idea because it's hidden from them and because there's so much money spent in marketing, teaching them that eating animals is natural and eating animals is good. And it's something that we've always done and always will do. And there's no understanding that the way we are doing it is so terrible and that there's an alternative, and the alternative is to eat plants. But I think we just need to be continuing to highlight it and to take advantage of this opportunity where people are paying attention, because normally people are not willing to pay attention to these issues. And now, because of the public health concerns, we should be really shouting it from the rooftops that all these beings are important and matter, and that they're just being bred to live short, sick, sad lives in these massive confinement spaces, sent to slaughter when babies and killed when they're sick babies. And that's the American food system. And it doesn't have to be. There's an alternative.
And that's why I hope everybody is sharing this video out. Please, everybody who's on this panel, everybody watching, because sometimes all it takes is one image. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Willful denial is a protection against cognitive dissonance. On some level, everybody knows when they're eating a piece of steak, or they're eating a meat hamburger, or they're eating a chicken wing, that they're eating an animal. But we've so disassociated the fact that these were animals, that these were individuals, just like this lovely lady, one of the ones who got out. And when you've saved one animal, you've saved the world for that animal. There are billions just like her, and each one has a unique personality. Each animal, whether it's your dog, your cat, the squirrel outside, the bird, each one, or these chickens, or these sheep, or these cows, each one has a unique personality. They are entitled to their lives. If people would just make that connection, all of this horror would go away, Jill. And I know you had another piece of video I'd like to see if I can get it up. But first, react to that that concept that right now, are we in a position where we might actually be able to convince people that these are individuals, that these are actual individual beings, each with their own personality?
I do think we're at a really unique tipping point here. First of all, I think that we all have seen, and we all just know that the majority of humans are opposed to animal cruelty. They don't necessarily always associate.
I don't know if we're seeing her. Are we hearing her? Okay. Yeah, you're okay. Well, will you take that one, Edita?
Yeah, I think I think what Jill was saying was, we're at this unique moment where there's a spotlight that was not there, because, as others have pointed out, we have these multi-billion-dollar corporations that have very wealthy lobbyists and attorneys that hide the truth. We have our own government that's kind of complicit in subsidizing and promoting and pushing and hooking children on. The food pyramid is compromised. The got milk ads. We're all sort of brainwashed that we need animal products. Look, I didn't go vegan until I was 23. Up until right before then, I bought into it. Maybe I questioned some things, but it took kind of a light bulb moment for me. And for me, it was actually visiting a sanctuary. At the time, it was Farm Sanctuary. It was the only one in existence almost 20 years ago. And that did it for me. I made that connection, but you have to undo a lot of dysfunctional programming since birth that we're all given. There's very few people who are born vegetarian or vegan. Those are very lucky ones, but you're undoing all of that brainwashing and what society said was normalized and the way it's supposed to be. And there's billions and billions of dollars and our own government kind of behind all of that.
So let's take this opportunity, and I think we'll get you back, Jill. But Rachel, tell us about the animals you're rescuing from factory farms, from wet markets during this crisis.
Yeah, so we're actually working right now on a campaign to try to solicit farmers that are killing their animals on site, because if the big slaughterhouses are shut down, it means that they can't ship the animals. So they're actually doing a lot of as Donny says, they're using words like depopulation and culling, but what they're doing is they're just killing the animals on site. And because they're not going through a proper slaughterhouse, they're throwing the bodies away. So what we're trying to do is actually offer an alternative to only a couple hundred animals probably, but we have hundreds of sanctuaries that are willing to step up and take in some animals. So we're trying to reach out to farmers that might have a little bit of space in their heart to give us, to pass some animals on to sanctuary. So that's a campaign we're working on right now with a big coalition of other sanctuaries, which is really exciting. And then we continue, Woodstock, as well as all the other sanctuaries, continue to take in animals, even during this economic crisis. We have at the sanctuary between 15 and 20 animals that were rescued directly from these live kill markets in New York. We have a mom and sheep, a mother sheep and her baby lamb that were rescued in August, who escaped from a live kill market. By the time she got to us, she was so sick that she collapsed and had to go to the hospital day one. So we're continuing to do this rescue work, but I'm also really excited about a coordinated sanctuary effort to save some of these beings that are being killed right now, and not only save their lives, but actually tell their stories and draw more attention to what's happening.
Wow. And Jill, are you back with us?
I hope so. I'm
Yes,
connected on my part.
You are. So please respond to the question that we had before.
Yes. Well, I think that what's so unique about this is not only do we have the interconnectedness of all beings being really amplified.
Oh, no, she's going out. But let me tell you this. I've got some footage that she shot that is very intense that I want to show you here. Check this out. Yeah, check this out right now. I'd like you to see it. And we're going to show you what really goes into your plate.
Oh, thank you for the kiss. I wish I could help you. Yeah.
That is a look at the beings that people don't want to acknowledge. There's some famous quote, the source of all evil is the belief that some suffering doesn't count. So, Donny, when you see that, it's so gut-wrenching to me. And Jill, what an incredible job you did capturing that footage. People, when you look in their eyes, the terror and the confusion in their eyes, it's so frustrating not to be able to just say, please, 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 let's spare their lives. Why do they have to die? Donny, why is it that some are so cold-hearted when even they see that footage, they can't make the connection? I mean, presumably, if everybody opened their hearts and they saw those animals suffering so that when they saw that, they would go, oh my gosh, I can't participate in killing that animal. Look at those poor beings, and they would stop eating animals. Why doesn't that happen? Because this idea that people don't know, I'm not sure I buy it right now. You'd have to really be, purposely closing your eyes, not to have seen this footage on YouTube, on Cowspiracy, What the Health, Countdown to Year Zero, Earthlings, Dominion, or Instagram, Twitter. I mean, the imagery has been out there for a while, Donny.
Ignorance is bliss, Jane. And I think people who see this horrific footage will often try and say that that's the aberration. That's not normal. That as long as it's well regulated and that the animals are treated humanely, that they can continue to consume animals. So I think people will justify continuing to eat animals by saying that. I also want to point out that the meat and dairy industry has done a very good job at normalizing the consumption of animals. It's almost un-American not to eat turkey on Thanksgiving, right? And un-American not to eat a hot dog made out of pig's lips or whatever at the ballpark. And so we are up against very powerful marketing forces that are so powerful, Jane, that they can censor TV news. They can prevent TV news from playing the very images that we're trying to play here.
But that's why I'm seeing a huge crack in the infrastructure for the first time, because the coronavirus cases are centered in slaughterhouses around the country. I mean, it's slaughterhouses, prisons, and senior homes. That's the three hotbeds, and slaughterhouses are right up there, and that makes it the global epicenter. They can't not cover it. Now, they do their best to, say meat packing and food and equate meat with food, even though we know that meat is the most inefficient food source, and it takes 8 to 25 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of steak, and we could eliminate world hunger very quickly if we redirected all of the food that we feed farm animals and directed that to starving children in third world countries. We know that, but now they're being forced to cover it. And even though they're dancing around the central issue I'm going to kick Jill from the studio, even though we love her, because it's she's dropping out a little bit. But even though, they have to cover it and they're dancing around, it's like the truth is coming out. It's like there's a crack in the dam and the truth is spilling out in little dribs and drabs. And then you have, moments where there's a major breakthrough, where you have like TMZ putting the slaughterhouse footage up. You have people connecting the dots. I do feel that it's like they're trying to contain the dam, but the dam is going to burst. Rachel, will you address that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if there's all the cracks in the dam, then we just have to be on the side of the water pushing and just get the truth out there however we can. I mean, Donny's right that what these big corporate TV stations are able to put on, they also have these huge sponsorships that are funded by animal ag. So it's limited, but we have social media, we have the power of individuals, we have finally some people in government, as Edita was talking about, that are getting it and are willing to be advocates on our side. We just have to keep telling the stories of these beings and of the people that are suffering and just telling the truth, because there's a lot of money and a lot of power that is entrenched in keeping the status quo. And we don't have a lot of money, we don't have a lot of power, but we have the truth, and we are on the side of justice, and we're on the side of what is right and what we need to do for our own public health, for the environment, and most of all, for all these beings who are suffering in these unsustainable and horrible systems. We just have to keep pushing, Jane. I mean, I think the more cracks, the more cracks spread, the better, and we're making progress, and it can't come too soon. There's so much suffering happening right now.
Let me say this, one last issue. Tyson Foods chairman, and by the way, we invite Tyson, Smithfield, JBS, any food processor, meat processor, slaughterhouse operator on at any time. We'd love to dialogue with you. Tyson Foods chairman warns the food supply is breaking. This is another, in my personal opinion, I'm not stating a fact, but it's a complete lie. The food supply would be in a complete abundance if we didn't have animal agriculture. Animal agriculture is what's creating the artificial scarcity that allows them to charge more for, let's say, a hamburger, along with governmental subsidies. We could live in a world of abundance where everybody had plenty to eat, and there's still tons of food available. The only shortage we're experiencing right now is a shortage of dead animal parts, Edita.
Yeah, Jane, I mean, imagine if we transitioned away from animal agriculture. The fact is that most of the crops grown on planet Earth are fed to animals that will be slaughtered. I mean, that's such a food injustice issue when we have many hungry people on this planet. It's such a resource-intensive, polluting, destructive industry, animal agriculture, that we know is a leading cause of climate change. But, we have upwards of 70 billion animals worldwide that are being bred, confined, abused, and slaughtered every year. All of them require mass amounts of food, crops. It's a main cause of wildlife devastation because we are destroying habitat in order to farm animals. I really feel like the root of so many of our injustices and violence in this planet could be shifted, could be alleviated significantly if we shifted away from animal agriculture. And as you pointed out, that now we have these cracks in the system, we all have to be breaking those bricks apart. And the fact that, you know, now we have Assembly Member Linda Rosendahl in New York, who was took the bold step to say she's introducing legislation. It will be coming out soon, I am told. And imagine what a game changer this could be if New York passed legislation prohibiting the operation of over 80 live animal markets. It could have a domino effect. I know California is introducing similar legislation. So is Illinois, I believe. This would create a domino effect and get worldwide attention. So we're all unified to help push that legislation and create that precedent that could really change the world.
Donny, do you see this as, I see it now, where we're in a very polarized society, left and right. And generally we don't talk about politics, but politics now is dovetailing with this issue. We noticed during the Democratic presidential primary, with the exception of Cory Booker and Tulsi Gabbard, who are both vegan, you had people who, candidates who you would think would be aware of the impact of animal agriculture on climate change, on human health, you know, talking about we've got to save our farmers, which are not really even farmers anymore. These are warehouse operators. The true farmers are also victims of factory farming. It seemed like there was just a complete lack of transparency amongst the major candidates to the issue of factory farming being a horror show that needs to go out. And you know, from Amy Klobuchar to Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, and Joe Biden, they were all talking about we have to save animal agriculture. And now we're starting to see, wait a second, Trump is insisting that we keep the slaughterhouses open. It's becoming a political issue. You have Rachel Maddow saying, well, it's not a conspiracy by blue state vegans to keep the slaughterhouses closed. I'm starting to see a red-blue dynamic here. Obviously, environmentalists should be vegan. Obviously, it's a leading, and now there's a new white paper that shows it's the leading cause of climate change, greenhouse gas emissions. And now they were able to sort of get away with not being vegan for a long time by just basically ignoring the issue. Then Joaquin Phoenix gets up at all the award ceremonies and talks about the impact and of animal agriculture on climate change, and the Golden Globes and the Saga Awards and the Critics' Choice Awards go vegan. And all of a sudden there's a little pressure on these environmental groups like, oh, well, maybe we got to have our galas be vegan too. And now you're seeing another way that, you know, pressure might be put on people who call themselves progressive, who call themselves liberal Democrats, who are beating their chest for workers' rights. Well, if you're eating animals that are being killed by people who are putting their lives at risk because the president of the United States said they have to go into coronavirus infested slaughterhouses and work, even though that could kill them, how liberal, how progressive are you?
Jane, even in a world without coronavirus, employees at slaughterhouses face more risk than employees anywhere else. They're working with these incredibly sharp tools. And so their plight was horrific before this virus ever emerged. I want to point out that during the height of the Democratic campaign, there was a state fair in Iowa where all of the Democratic candidates except Cory Booker were flipping burgers. And that was happening at the same exact time that Greta Thunberg was captivating the world with her message about climate change. And the disconnect at the time between what those candidates who were all talking about climate change on the campaign trail while actually causing climate change by flipping burgers and normalizing that disconnect was really eye-opening and disturbing. And I think one thing that I've learned through this pandemic is sort of a way to address all of these people who say that eating meat is my personal choice. Well, if nothing else, this pandemic demonstrates that one person's decision to eat meat affects all of us, because these pandemics arise or emerge from places where animals are being killed.
I so agree with you, and I was so horrified and frustrated to see the progressive Democratic candidates flipping burgers and eating wings and going to steak something or others while they're talking about climate change. It's like, oh my God. But now we're seeing it from a new perspective, a new set of glasses. You know, Donald Trump, our president, who is obviously very polarizing, nobody needs me to tell them that, is now saying, look, those slaughterhouse workers have to go into those coronavirus-infested slaughterhouses, and the meatpacking companies, who are all invited on, are cheering, thrilled about this. And so now those workers, some of them staged a walkout. I talked to a union leader who said, she's not a vegan, but she said, I represent 3,000 slaughterhouse workers. People can go without beef if it means somebody putting their life on the line to go into a slaughterhouse. I'm starting to see a new dynamic. And Rachel, do you see where I'm getting at this?
Yeah, I do. And I hope they never go back to work and that we just shut these places down. One thing that I think is so horrifying to me is that right now, animals in farms and breeding facilities are being artificially inseminated for the next round of babies meant for slaughter. And so there's going to be this continual pile up of all these animals that are reaching slaughter weight, which is, usually between 4 months and 6 months, depending on the species. And all of that continues. So I think if we can shut down slaughterhouses, keep them shut down, keep the workers safe, and then also try to stop the production of these beings as much as possible and highlight that. But yeah, watching all the Democratic presidential candidates flip burgers while giving lip service to the climate crisis is pretty staggering. And hopefully this is the sort of thing that will make people reconsider whether or not that's the optics they want to go with in the future.
Yes, there you go. There you go. Right there. It does give one pause.
Yeah.
To become a cheerleader, to be a cheerleader for an industry that right now in national networks are saying you're sending people to their deaths if you put them in a slaughterhouse that has coronavirus, and make them work because Donald Trump said that this is an essential industry, when the union leaders are like, no, people can go without beef if it means somebody dying on a slaughterhouse line. So, the other thing I wanted to say, and we're wrapping up here for the top of the hour, and I want to thank you all for joining us, is that you mentioned artificially inseminated. Well, I always say forcibly impregnated. And you know what that's called? That's called rape. In the industry, there is a term, rape rack. Mm-hmm. And so I've always been appalled that feminists don't see the connection. Do you really think all these billions of animals in these warehouses are making love? It's time to stop the fairy tales, okay? There's a point in your life where you say, Santa Claus is nice, but it's Santa Claus. And this is what I see people having done. And what I really think is extraordinary about this crisis is it shatters the fairy tales. It shatters the fairy tales. People are having to see, wow, there's a backlog of animals, so they got to kill them because they can't kill them. And when they kill them because they can't kill them, they're calling it depopulation. But when they get them to the slaughterhouse and they kill them so that we can eat them, they call it processing. I mean, you'd really have to be literally wearing earplugs and a sleep mask, Edita, not to see that there's something really almost sociopathic, not even almost sociopathic about this system that rapes animals into existence, abducts their babies from them, and then kills the whole lot.
it's very insidious. And of course, as a woman, I especially feel sensitive to those issues, and I know others do. And I think when many people learn and see footage of, veal calves, dairy calves being taken away from their mothers and the mothers bellowing. But, I know very intelligent people even with PhDs who are very well educated, who actually, even into adulthood, were not aware that in order to give milk, for their milk to be taken from cows, that they had to be pregnant and have their babies taken away. Because as others have pointed out, I think that these huge billion-dollar corporations have done such a good job of brainwashing people and hiding the truth. But now, because of where we are in the world and this crisis and so many others, the environmental crisis, this truth is coming out, and we all have to keep screaming it from the rooftops. And yes, showing the images that are disturbing, but show the truth, that tug at people's heartstrings, that make them connect. Because so many Americans, people that eat animals every day, they consider their pets their family members. But there's really so little difference between a cow or a dog or a pig or a cat. They are all living beings who are sensitive and have emotions and suffer. And of course, all of them want to be with their babies, and all of them just want to live a life and deserve to live a life free of pain and suffering and exploitation. And we can't have a food system that is centered around exploiting and harming and torturing and killing billions and billions of animals every year to the detriment of every living thing on earth. We can't have that any longer.
Absolutely. And this terrible crisis, my heart goes out to everyone who's lost a loved one, who's out of work, who's alone and isolated and feeling lonely. But this is the game changer. At this point, the final thing I'd like to say as we wrap up, Donny, is that even if you weren't vegan for ethical reasons or for climate change reasons or for personal health reasons, I ordered plant-based milk I take out one from the box that I ordered every week, because it lasts so much longer, and canned goods that are primarily vegetables last longer. So what perfect time to make the transition when literally you could risk your life going into a supermarket, right? I mean, I have been ordering on Instacart from Sprouts and from a vegan restaurant down the street. I'm not going into supermarkets if I can help it. So what better time than to start making the transition now?
Yeah, and Jane, the difference between making that switch now and making it all of those years ago isn't just that we have all of this information about the effect of animal agriculture on the planet and on our health and on the animals and on these infectious diseases, but now we have all of these options that were unthinkable. We can really eat the same things that meat eaters eat, but they're made out of plants, the burgers, the cheese, the eggs. They're virtually indistinguishable. One more point that I'd like to make, Jane, is that,
this is, by the way, vegan corned beef that was featured on Shark Tank. Mark Cuban, who is now a vegetarian, invested $250,000 in this company, and you can order it from unrealdeli.com and have your vegan corned beef delivered. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's nothing that we can't have a plant-based alternative for. Also, it's easy for humans to look back at past injustices, Jane. We can do that with no problem. The trick is for everybody to look at what we're doing right now and see 20 years from now, what will those things be that we're doing right now that people are going to be horrified about in the future? And slaughter, factory farming, all of these things that we're doing right now are going to be people are going to be stunned. The idea that we even have such a place as a slaughterhouse in the 21st century is staggering. Places where billions of animals are mercilessly killed. How does that even exist in the modern day world?
Yes, and I'll give you the last word, and please, everybody, support Rachel McCrystal, support Woodstock Animal Sanctuary, woodstocksanctuary.org. I've been there. I've gotten tours. It's an extraordinary place. You do amazing work. You're right outside New York City. And just your final words on why people really should just make a donation today so that you can keep your important work going.
I think that the real heroes of the animal rights movement have been the animals and always will be the animals. Animals escape from slaughterhouses and live kill markets every day, and they need a place to go. And they need us to tell their stories so that hearts and minds can be changed across the country. So whether it's us, WoodstockSanctuary.org, Farm Sanctuary, Catskill Animal Sanctuary, Animal Place, there's all these really amazing sanctuaries that are doing incredible, powerful work of true animal liberation, and centering these amazing survivors from the meat industry, and support sanctuaries. There are, hopefully one day, that's all we will have, is sanctuaries and places where these animals can live out their lives with their families. So support them now, because there's a lot that really need help.
Thank you so much. What an incredible panel. Heroes, every single one of you. I love you all. And please share this out so that others can hear this and make the shift so we can all survive as a human species. See you next time on Jane and Jane Live Talk. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Jane.